Alright, hello everyone, Joe here. So for my video presentation I chose to discuss what my research paper was on, which was a question presented to us in chapter 4. The question is, what is the difference between cultural sensitivity and ethnic stereotyping? So this was interesting to me because of a sentence that followed it that I really didn't have a problem with at first or see any issue around. So the sentence was, in 1997, American Airlines was criticized for a flight manual that said Latin American customers like to drink before takeoff. I think that's very useful information. Um, if I were a flight attendant, I'd want them to be comfortable. But does that cultural information make it possible for the airline to provide better customer service? Or is it an example of ethnic stereotyping by saying all Latin American customers like to drink before takeoff? That is basically what it says. Um, so as useful as it seemed at first, after doing the research and completing my paper, I realized it wasn't as simple as, I wasn't as black and white as, oh, that's great, that's good. All right, you're Latin American. I'm going to give you a drink so you can become. It's not that simple. That's basically developing an ethnic norm for the entire culture, such as the Latino and Hispanic questions that we answered this past week in our reading. Basically, it's an ethnic stereotype, I think, to call someone a Latino, putting them into a cultural norm that they may not be a part of. Maybe they're Spanish speaking, however, it doesn't necessarily make them Latino. So first of all, I'd like to identify what cultural sensitivity is, particularly in a medical context. I kind of geared my paper after doing some research around the medical field. There was just a lot of really good information that was interesting to me, and I felt would help me further my career in the medical field. So, cultural sensitivity is defined as the knowledge and interpersonal skills that allow providers to understand, appreciate, and work with individuals from cultures other than their own. It involves an awareness and an acceptance of cultural differences, self-awareness, knowledge of a patient's culture, and adaptation of skills. So an adaptation of skills to me means taking the awareness and acceptance of cultural differences, self-awareness of the patient, and knowledge of the patient's culture, and using those things, those skills that you've learned, and molding them for each specific patient. So, for example, some things that researchers have found in regards to cultural sensitivity are they've identified that elderly Korean Americans and Mexican Americans are said to be more likely to believe that the family and not the patient should make end-of-life decisions. So if you are a medical provider and you are taking care of an elderly Korean or Mexican American, it's important to know how the family dynamics um, works in this situation. And I think that may sound like stereotyping to a point, but you also need to have some adaptation of the skills that you've learned. And I think knowing this information about elderly Korean Americans and elderly Mexican Americans, you can mold those skills based on the presentation that they have. If you're in their room and they are surrounded by family members, it's pretty safe to say that the family as a whole needs to be a part of whatever decision needs to be made at this point. And ethnic stereotyping can be defined as a fixed or generalized belief about a particular group or class of people. And by stereotyping, we respond to situations based on these generalized beliefs, so without acknowledging the individual person as a member of a culture. or as a member of a society, a culture within a culture. Stereotypes have the virtue of simplicity. They put every historical event in black and white. They provide simple, if deceptive, explanations of complex circumstances and historical realities. Stereotypes leave no space for uncertainties. It's simple. You're Spanish speaking, then you are Latino, or you are Hispanic. You're either one of those. There's no in between. There's nothing. There's Latino, there's Hispanic. Based on the fact that you are Spanish speaking. That is not the case, as we just learned. Not only do stereotypes distort history through oversimplification, but they are also extremely dangerous breeding grounds for fear, resentment, irrationality, animosity, hatred, and ethnic conflict. A lot of conflicts that occur based on ethnicity or based on these things probably could be avoided if there was some understanding between the two cultures that were feuding. This process of ethnic stereotyping makes ethnic identities simple, and they're not. After doing this research paper, I really learned a lot about the depth of ethnic identities. And by labeling a culture based on historical events or behaviors, you're removing the autonomy that each member of the society or the culture itself holds. In fact, you're creating an ethnic stereotype. Instead, for example, perhaps we should consider the following. Patients are not simply Chinese, Korean, or Cree. They are distinctive human beings without individual histories, with individual histories and concrete community ties. And as complex beings, they are not likely to be defined by just one marker of identity. Instead of promoting notions of culture, perhaps we should be, trying to place more emphasis on seeking to understand these patients and their families, or these people in all of their particulars, asking open-ended questions, establishing an understanding of a culture. By establishing an understanding of a culture, we can then know how to begin communication. We need to have, by doing this, the only way to establish the understanding of a culture and of a person is by continued interactions and open discussion regarding beliefs and behaviors, and complete acceptance of those beliefs and behaviors. No judgments of the culture or person can be made. Once you start doing that, you cross into stereotyping, and you may never come back. So lastly, one area that seems to be moving toward a better understanding of cultural sensitivity is the education system, through classes like this one. Also, I found a lot of information regarding nursing classes that were geared solely towards ethnic diversity. For example, there was one class called Psychology of Ethnic Groups course, and its primary purpose, was to educate, sensitize, and stimulate critical thinking about the role of culture and ethnicity in human social behavior. The course not only provided students with an understanding of the psychological realities of its members of the various ethnic groups in the United States, but more important, it also provides them with the essentials for understanding psychological facts and theories from an ethnically diverse perspective. So by spending more time with someone from a different culture, that's really the best way to develop culturally sensitive material. Thanks for listening to me, and I look forward to listening to everyone else's presentations. Thank you.